So I'm Kenny Ochoa. I'm the co-founder of Quiver, which is basically a multifaceted creative agency that focuses on music supervision, booking talent for privates. There's a technology aspect to it, as well as some verticals in the music business. I've been in the music business for almost 20 years at companies like Warner Brothers and Sony. Also the co-creator and co-producer of Decoding the Music Experience, which Ali spoke about. And for Joe and I, who we've worked together, he'll get a little bit into his past in the sense is that it's been really important for us to talk about the relationship between music and brands and content creators, because there's such a shift in that relationship, and we feel like there's always a lot and so much to learn about how the translation of it, in a sense, from both sides, and the language that goes on, and how deals go, and from transactional kind of relationships to more partnerships in that sense. So that's what the podcast is about, and we make the panel about it, and today it's really going to be about how people uniquely interact with music in a sense, and we'll get into some of that, and I'll give it to Joe.
Great, cool, thank you. So my name's Joe Belliotti. I currently run a company called the Music Division, which helps emerging and established brands navigate the music space. And like Kenny said, there are a lot of brands playing in the music space, but I think very few are doing it impactfully, meaning that they're actually driving their business and they're seeing the growth and the potential music has to build cultural relevance. And it's not just me as an opinion, it's sort of a fact. I mean, if you look at the amount of money brands spend in sports, which is $20 billion, and the amount they spend in music, which is less than $2 billion, it shows that they're not getting that impact. So when we created Decoding the Music Experience, we wanted to make sure that we're highlighting the things the brands can do to see that impact, to ask the right questions, answer the right questions. How is music driving your strategy? How is it positioned to grow your business? And to focus on some of the people, platforms, and things that are happening in the space that are being done really, really well. So we're lucky to have with us an amazing panel of people doing really smart things in the music space. And I think we'll just start with a quick introduction down the line, if that's cool.
Sure. Hi, my name's Tom Lehman. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Genius. Genius is a media company, a music media company dedicated to bringing people the deeper meaning behind music and enhancing their music listening experience with music intelligence.
Hi, Jonathan Anastas, Chief Marketing Officer of Live by Live. We're a music streaming platform with a focus on live entertainment.
Hi, I'm Ruthie Shoulder, CEO of the Participation Agency. We're an experiential agency. We have a marquee music program called For Those Who Tour, which is a series of houses and fancy rest stops across the US where emerging musicians stay for free in exchange for social content.
Hey, I'm Tatiana Oliveira Simonian. I'm head of entertainment partnerships at Tumblr. I'm the former head of music at Twitter. And I'm also a musician who did not make it and has a day job.
Oh, me too.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
Everyone in the music business.
No, you did all right. You actually did all right, Jonathan, right? Yeah.
Well, it depends how you define all right.
Cool. So, all right, let's kick it off with questions. And I think what you see here, this is really about the music experience. It's not just music for an ad. This is really about how you engage audiences through music. And let's start with Ruthie and the experience itself. How, if I'm a brand and I'm looking to connect with people through a music experience, how do I determine whether I should integrate into an existing music festival or should I create my own activation? I mean, just even that sort of question is sort of daunting.
Yeah, I work with a lot of brands across all different verticals, and all of them have different appetites for how much they want to build their own audience versus leverage an audience that already exists. So I'd say that is one of the biggest determining factors of whether or not you have the stomach to take on something like launching your own program. Another thing is honestly resources. I mean, you have to really come up with something so amazing to cut through all the clutter of all like the festival sponsorships and all of the brands who are just throwing so much money at the wall. So you kind of have to weigh all of these different factors of like, do I have the right idea? Do I have the right amount of money, honestly, to execute it at the level where it's going to be effective? And like, what are the other things I could be leveraging that already exist? And are those better? Or is my idea really the thing that's going to make it be successful?
And I feel like there's a lot of like missed expectations after brands sponsor festivals because they're not getting the scale they thought, or they're, to your point, they're not asking the right questions of what am I going to get out of this? They get so excited to jump in to be there, but then they need to link it back
Yeah.
to their business.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about because we actually got our agency started. We basically spent the first 3 years of our agency doing music festival activations for our clients. And after your client has spent $1 million and you're standing in a field in Tennessee at Bonnaroo with no Wi-Fi for your computer client, you're just like, what the fuck is going on? And how can I come up with something better because this is kind of dumb? And then you go and we're immersive experience creators, and you go and you're at these festivals, and the biggest sponsors, sure, they have their 40 by 40 activation with charging and air conditioning and lots of people on drugs, and that's great. But then they also really, all they get is the sign at the side of the stage, and that's not a thing that is gonna work of connecting a consumer mindset, and turning them into a brand loyalist. And so we really sat back and we were like, what is a kind of program that can actually be effective, that gives you the access to the artists that all the brand managers want, that gets you a constant drumbeat of conversation instead of just these one-off tentpole events where you go and hope you don't get evacuated from Lollapalooza from a tornado, which happened to us one year. So there are all of these factors, and so we were like, how do you, and brands are always going to sponsor music festivals, and the conversations I'm having with companies now is how do you complement the thing you're already doing? If you're sponsoring the big New York, LA moments, that's great. We get that the CMO of your company always wants to do that. It makes them feel cool. That's awesome. But what are the other things we can do to filter in so that you have a strategy that feels way more 360 and way more just honestly consistent?
I mean, I almost say, you're talking about the experience, right? Creating a unique experience rather than just a brand sign. And I think that's something that's creative and not just about advertising, right?
Yeah.
And I think this might even go with Jonathan when you're streaming something, or Tatiana with you and brands creating a unique experience between your platform and artists, and that goes anywhere, right? Whether it's involved in a brand execution or not, it's about creating a unique music experience. And that.
Yeah, I think. I guess it's also worth mentioning, before Tumblr, I was VP of Branded Entertainment at Nielsen, and I built a division that was looking at how you measure sponsorships. And I realized most people don't do that.
Yeah.
And so we think a lot alike. One example is that I had a client who was really interested in sponsoring the EDM space. And I looked at all of their creative, and I found that it was overwhelmingly Caucasian. And yet the data that we had on the EDM audience is that it's 30% Latino. And I was like, you have no partnerships with any Latino DJs, your creative features no people of color, and yet you're in the market trying to get people to care about your brand, and it's not gonna resonate unless it's fully reflective of this. And secondarily, I think that, as a musician, there's a bias that I bring to this conversation that I'm sure all music people do, which is anything that feels too overt is something that never is going to hit, right? I think in the pop world, some of that is tongue-in-cheek, but if you're trying to do a strategy where, let's say, you're trying to work with indie bands or someone who's maybe a bit under the radar, how do you facilitate the conversation and serve as the channel for that conversation without overwhelming the conversation with your brand, so that it looks like a very cheesy powered by moment, as South by experienced a lot and then kind of backpedaled on, and becomes more about, hey, we're just trying to give you guys more great experiences, and as a part of doing that, do it in a way that's really authentic.
And I think one of the things about Tumblr, and I want to pivot also to Genius on this, because both platforms give you context around music, right? I mean, there's a lot of content, being thrown your way, but this additional context that comes around the stories, the narratives, the perspectives that come on a Tumblr or a Genius are pretty unique to those platforms. So maybe a couple of examples of what's happening on the platform for Tumblr, which if you heard the podcast, I was absolutely blown away because I had this preconception about what Tumblr was, and I was wrong compared to what it is today and what's happening. And then even the same question for Genius is providing that additional context around music and what that means.
I think, yeah, so I think something interesting to know about Tumblr is we don't think we're Facebook, we don't think we're Twitter, we don't think we're Instagram, we don't think we're Snap. And I don't really think of them as competitors. I think of them as partners in the same space, having conversations with people. I'm a former Twitter employee. I still use Twitter. I still have friends at all of those platforms. I know the me of every other social platform. I think that's something you don't hear a lot. Secondarily, Tumblr has never been about likes and follows. We don't show that. So the conversations I have with a lot of A-list music artists who do use Tumblr is, this is my DL thing that I use to find inspiration. Or we will find artists that are bubbling up and partner with them before anyone else does. Last year we did a small brunch at South by Southwest for an artist that we started to see pick up on the platform. That was Billie Eilish. Last year at Fashion Week, we had an artist perform who was starting to bubble up and we felt really excited about. That was Lizzo. This year, both of them have hit critical mass. We have a pretty great track record, Halsey, Frank Ocean, Lorde, before Spotify. And in ways, it's sometimes Tumblr's a bit too early, but it's sort of like the cool hunting space for social platforms. And it's one of the reasons why, like to this day, I've had my Tumblr since 2009. It's not very professional. Fish Need Bicycles, follow it. You'll see a bunch of like acid GIFs and like shoegaze. It's still a social platform that makes me feel good. It doesn't feel like I'm trying to be someone else. It just feels like somewhere where I can be myself.
Genius also a platform about positivity. Also, it's you know, a platform not just about positivity, about knowledge, which is like kind of an even harder thing to get in some ways excited about on the internet if you are looking at it from the outside. But what's so great about the Genius community and the Genius experience is that, you know, when a piece of music comes out, whether it's, you know, something obscure, Taylor Swift's new album, there are a lot of different places you can go to experience that. You can stream the song, most obviously. You can talk about it on social media, but then there's a certain type of person who wants to lean in the most and first of all get the lyrics, maybe even transcribe the lyrics before they're out, figure out what the song is actually about, and then even share this knowledge with others. And that is what Genius is about, the place where these fans converge and share the knowledge when the album is released. And then you can look at these signals, what these people are doing before the Taylor Swift album comes out, and you can take that signal, what they're searching for, what they're annotating, what they're transcribing, and use that to figure out who's next. And that's a big thing that we do when we're trying to book our video series. So if you go on youtube.com/genius, you can take a look at some of the videos we put out, and you probably won't recognize many of the artists there right now. And that's because we are very careful to try to look at signals that will point us and uniquely for us identify who's next. And that also helps us when we're trying to figure out who to pair with brands for a partnership.
And Genius sort of turned Spotify for me into a visual experience too, because, you know, I love the idea of trying to understand the meaning or the context behind why certain things are said in certain songs and why it's written, right? And then obviously the things you mishear or you misunderstand, but you're always learning something new about the songs, especially when it's like, you know, just integrated so well into that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, to me, it's there. You know, listening to music is not just sound waves. You know, your brain doesn't have direct access to the sound waves. It hits the part of your brain that interprets it, and if you have the right lyrics, the right interpretation, it changes the way the music sounds, and that's something we believe really deeply at Genius.
Very cool.
And that's a consumer-facing part of what you have, but I think Genius is really a great tool for B2B as well. I know as, you know, whether you're a music supervisor or someone that's trying to figure out, or creatively, you know, as an artist manager, see who produced what and kind of go down a rabbit hole of creativity, it's a great source and resource as well.
No, yeah, definitely. And this is something that we've kind of used, you know, idiosyncratically, like the Genius database, the Genius, like the connections between songs that we have. Now we're actually trying to systematize it as we work with brands to, you know, both identify artists and understand, you know, from a metric standpoint, like how is a sponsorship doing? Like, you know, when we look at, you know, activations that don't have as easily straightforward metrics, you have to kind of expand your mind. And so one thing that we look at Genius every quarter is we do the Genius Brand Index. We look at all of the brands that are mentioned in lyrics, and we look at the sentiment analysis of how they're mentioned, and we come up with the index. And so you know, this is a newsletter product that we have out, which I would love to offer to all of y'all if you hit me at Tom at Genius. But the quarterly report for Q3 is about to come out, and I'll tease it a little bit. Mercedes just dethroned Gucci for the #1 brand in music right now. But the whole list is very interesting. It's not just luxury brands.
That's cool. So, Jonathan, live by live streaming. When I look at music, I see music at the forefront of almost any technology, right? Any innovation, the way we consume audio impacts how we consume video, and there'd be no Netflix if it wasn't for Napster, and we could talk about all that other stuff. But live streaming, I feel like music is behind, right? I mean, gaming took the lead with Twitch, and now here you are, thankfully, like filling that void from a live streaming perspective. Why do you think music and live streaming have been, for video live streaming, have been so hard to crack?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think there's the rights issue, which is probably not that interesting to the audience here. That's been sort of a big challenge, right? Where you get this sort of loophole of live, but then sort of replays requires sync approvals and all that stuff. I'm actually as surprised as you are because, you know, prior to this I worked at Activision, and given the sort of 18 to 34-year-old target audience, pretty much the only television we bought was live, right? The only linear television we bought was live. It wasn't like, you know, the Premier League in Europe or the NBA Finals or something. Here, we sort of thought like it's an ad skippable audience, and I think that same thing's going to be applied to digital video pretty quickly, right? So, you know, you're sort of going to get an advertising tune out on VOD in the same way that you got it in linear television. And so I agree with you. We don't sort of understand why sort of more money hasn't sort of come into the, you know, if you look at like the 18 to 34-year-old audience, it's gaming, it's sports, and it's music, right? Like YouTube's categories are, you know, music is number one, you know, gaming's number two, sports is number three. And if you're trying to reach that audience, I agree with you, sort of hitting the live streaming of music is there. And I think it's sort of bringing artists around to sort of the value of it, you know, and sort of go from there. You know, I think sometimes they're concerned about the quality of their performance, so they want to be controlling of the asset, right? They want to put it out after the fact, not during the fact, because you kind of can't take it back if you didn't have the best performance. But I think the dollars are going to come, and we've been working with Tubular, you know, which is like a big insight tool, and they caution me not to use the annual data because it's not there yet, but live music upstreams on social media platforms are moving up like 7% a month, right? So that's almost like a doubling year over year, which is far faster than like live gaming uploads and live sports uploads. So I think that's the first data point that says it's coming.
Yeah, very cool.
How do you guys interact with brands in that sense? Because I know that's something new that we've talked about.
So in some ways, we have it a little easier, which is our metrics are a little bit more traditional media metrics, which are, you know, so what we're sort of selling is we're selling impressions. We're convincing of those impressions with engagements, right? And the good news is because music's a high passion thing, and they're really lucky if somebody watches 12 seconds of, you know, some sort of more commercial video, we can show people engagement times of 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 18 minutes, 22 minutes, right? Which is very impressive to brands. So, you know, to some degree, we're selling traditional, comfortable media metrics, but I think it's most interesting when brands come in and sort of add, you know, you guys talked about context. Like we had Kia come in for Rolling Loud, and we launched a program called Live Zone, which is sort of like the ESPN game day of live music. And we had 9 hosts sort of decoding 2 days, 2 stages, you know, 50 acts in the hip hop world. And Kia, in essence, was the marquee sponsor of that value add, right? That sort of decoding of, you know, probably the hottest hip hop festival, you know, in the nation, if not the world. And so Kia got the value of being the enabler of that decoding.
So that's interesting. You do have a more traditional sort of way of, for marketers and media companies to look at the platform. I say Tumblr and Genius, you don't, right? I mean, you do, but you don't. I think if you're looking at Tumblr or Genius, and a lot of the music platforms out there as a potential to reach just that audience that's on the platform or a segment of that audience that's on the platform, you're missing the big picture. I mean, even Spotify, I mean, how many people are, you know, still music fanatics and not paying for the subscription, right? So when you look at something like a Tumblr or a Genius, what are the ways that, you know, you wish brands, marketers, artists would look at the platform to use it as a way to springboard a story, springboard an idea, do something different other than looking at it as a straight placement of media?
I'll let you go since you're all music.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'd love to. So one is I just want to, you know, say some positive stuff about straight placements of media as we dig into this.
Of course.
Media is great. Media on Genius is great. You know, we have a very large audience, 80 million global uniques, 20 million comps. We can, but on a serious note, like, if you think about media, broadly speaking, just like run of site, that's one thing. That's great. But if you adopt a little more of a nuanced approach and think about, OK, who are the artists that I want to reach throughout this campaign, maybe with video experiential? Can I reach just their pages on Genius, just their songs where they talk about X? And then also, we are always trying to work on ad products that are, that fit in traditional media contexts, but also leverage Genius's unique quality. So one example is a trivia ad unit. We just did a big sort of trivia activation with Boost Mobile at a festival we threw called IQBBQ, and there was a big trivia game that it was IRL at that festival, but then we also had a media unit, an ad unit on the site that asked everyone who was coming to learn, challenge them as well. But beyond the website, beyond media, I just want people to think big about lyrics. We were talking before about Coca-Cola, lyrics on the can. A very simple idea, something that, Coke has done, doesn't do all the time. Others don't do this at all. Lyrics have so much potential because they are literally the language within the language of music that people use when they're trying to figure out who they want to become. And so one example of this was a program that we did a while ago last year that I want to do again. It was called Lyrics to Life, which was basically like taking, lyrics are live on a can, and that's what would lyrics look like as physical installations that you can walk around in, feel, touch, play with. Like, how do you take your favorite lyric? Think about your favorite lyric. Think about acting out your favorite lyric and how that might make you feel. And so, this was a great twist for us in terms of taking experiential and not just doing a concert, not just doing a festival type activation, but really creating a kind of museum to lyrics that was something where, people could come and immediately identify with the art. And so, really, I just love brands, and I'm biased, obviously, but think about lyrics. Think big about lyrics.
So won't stop till I see my name on a blimp.
Exactly.
Exactly. How big we should be thinking.
But it's an interesting point about lyrics because it all, the song and the lyrics are what's the start of any recording. It's the beginning, right? And traditionally, music publishers are a little less interactive with direct-to-brand conversations and having those as opposed to labels and artists directly who are having partnerships as well. And I think that's something where the music publishing companies and writers directly need to start evolving a little bit more and talking direct to brand about lyrics, and because it's emotional, right? You remember the lyrics to every, there's a soundtrack to your life, but there's lyrics from that soundtrack.
And to that point, I think there is also an unsexy aspect of this lyrics to life. We wanted to do, it was all a dream, Juicy, Notorious B.I.G. We wanted to have an installation. Someone had to clear the rights to that. And as you say, no one's done that before exactly. So that's a big part of the value we offer is we're saying, look, we'll handle this. Oh, it's a totally unique use of lyrics. We will take care of it as long as it makes sense for the user, for the consumer you're trying to reach.
Very cool. Ruthie, we met a long time ago when I was at Coke, and we never worked together, but I've been a massive fan of your company for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
Because when I was sitting in the brand seat, I would get a lot of proposals that were like, hey, if you pay for this, we'll build it for you. And I'm like, that's great. I'll take all the risk. It won't work. You'll get paid. Why not? Sign me up. It was so illogical, right? And not to pick on anyone, whether it was labels or agencies or companies, whoever. It was always like, hey, we have an idea for you. You pay us. You pay for the whole thing, and then we'll see if it works. You guys flipped that entirely on its head, and the reason why you guys struck with me the first time, and I never forgot you, is because you guys actually invested in creating assets, not waiting for the brands to come on board, proving it had success and consumers were interested, and then bringing brands on, which sounds so novel, but so right, no?
Yeah, so Jessica, my co-founder, and I, both of us have very entrepreneurial backgrounds, and we are, we're marketers and we're experienced designers and we're all of those things, but at the heart, we're risk-taking entrepreneurs. And neither of us actually have agency backgrounds, so when we started our agency, we were like, let's build this into the thing that we think it should be and forget about all of the other rules because there's no reason for us to be in a box. And so one of the things that we do that does set us apart in the industry is we create our own assets. So if there's a creative idea that we really believe in, we will take the financial and the creative risk and we will bring it to life and we will prove back the case to our clients, our partners, and then the goal always is that they, in year 2 or whatever, they come and they sponsor it. And we've been doing this at different scales throughout, that's kind of one of the big things that actually ended up launching our agency. This is a non-music project, but I'll mention it. We did a project 8 years ago called Timeshare Backyard, and it came to life because this Wall Street Journal reporter was called Jessica and was like, "What are you working on?" And she told this person all the stuff that we were working on, and she was like, "Meh." And she was like, "This is an idea we hadn't decided we were going to do." And she was like, "And we're doing this thing called Timeshare Backyard, and we're taking over a stalled building lot, and we're turning it into a suburban backyard that people can rent out by the hour." And this reporter was like, "Great, I want to come. When is it going to be open?" And she goes, "In 2 weeks." We like got a zoning law changed, and we were like a 3-person team at the time, and it was crazy. But the second year, Fuse, one of Coke's brands, actually came on and sponsored it. And to this day, every summer, we still get people emailing to be like, "When is the backyard open?" And we were like, "We closed this 6.5 years ago." But the payoff, so we like to move really quickly. And I don't know how many of you guys work in servicing brands. You don't always get to do that, and you don't always get to keep the vision at the highest level of creative. There's a lot of getting buy-in, and ideas get watered down and all of that. And so it's really important to like our spirits to be able to move really quickly, because we are two people that move really quickly, and to bring something to life in like the exact way that we think is true to the vision. And we can go in, when I'm going in and talking to the agency, to new potential partners, I talk about our brand projects all day long, but like our biggest calling card are these projects that we just like go gangbusters on and just do.
Because you're creating something that people actually love, right?
Yeah.
And then if there's a role for the brand or the product or
Yeah.
the service, they can come on top of it, right?
I mean, we're true marketers, so we're always thinking about it as like, let me say it this way. We know that they're going to be successful from a marketing standpoint because we've thought through like, how do you make this 360? What are the metrics? How are we executing so that we're achieving all those metrics? Like, we kind of know the end of the story before we do it very purposefully, because we're still a small company. We're not a funded company. We don't have unlimited resources, so we have to be very careful when we do these things. But we are able to then go and sell it as like, we already took the risk, here are all the wins, get on board with us.
And that's so much easier for a brand to jump on board with something consumers want or need.
Totally.
So speaking of that, like a little off script, so you co-founded Genius, Tom.
Yes, I did.
So did you think you'd be sitting here at Advertising Week talking about Genius when you started that?
Absolutely. Come on. Okay. No, I ton of things that I didn't anticipate that would lead up to this. The number one thing is that Genius, I had no idea it was going to become an economically relevant thing in terms of my job and life. I thought it was a spun side project, basically. It was a side project born out of the sort of experience that we still just literally cater to, the exact thing of just, what is that song? What is that lyric? What does that song mean? I was in my East Village apartment. My friends were explaining to me what songs meant, what the lyrics meant to hip hop songs. I was just getting into rap. I was listening to a lot of Cameron, a lot of Jay-Z. And just having this experience I was just like, wow, like this totally changes the whole song for me. Let's make a website for this. And so, that was the idea. And then over time, it sort of evolved. And then, only really in like 2015, 2016, did we really choose exactly what we wanted to be when we grew up and decided how we were going to, monetize and what type of, full sort of complete company we wanted to build. But definitely had no idea. And, also, never really thought of myself as like a music what allowed me to found the site was because I didn't know anything about music and I knew how good it was to learn. Now I actually know a lot, by the way. But so yeah.
That's cool.
What were you doing before?
So there was some other startup stuff. We were working on startups. I was trying to like make something happen. So a bunch of the other ideas were kind of more like, in the sort of economically like, So one idea was this, it was a startup based around the idea of a very simple way to buy bed sheets. So this has become big now. I was the first. No. A lot of things I've learned since then. One big thing is the role of branding. Our company, Alon's and my company, was called Bomb Sheets. not a great name. Like These Sheets of the Bomb doesn't have that feeling of quality that like a parachute does. But that was a big project we were working on. We had another thing that was kind of similar to Venmo, and just trying a bunch of different ideas. I was learning to program. I remember saying to myself, if I could just build 20 websites. I mean, come on, one of them is going to go somewhere. That was before that I worked at a hedge fund, which was different, but it was also cool.
That's where I was getting at.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where I was getting at. But I think, there's a theme here a little bit too, and which I love, and sometimes is a little bit altruistic, is that, the idea and the creative is first, and that's, and the commercial and the money and stuff comes later, because the idea is what's important. And in creative, I work in, in music, and the ups and downs and different, and you'd be talking about how you're going to market a record or an artist without hearing their record, and I was always just like, how could you don't even know what the music sounds like, in the sense, because you're trying to put it in a pocket, and as opposed to figuring out what you're going to do with it based on what it sounds and how it affects you personally, in that sense. Jonathan, so Live by Live, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, right? But how did that all start,
Well, I'm not a founder. I was
No, I know.
for it, but I think it was the idea of sort of looking at the opportunity space, right? Because if you think about it, this stuff had existed in disparate places for a long time. I mean, you ran music at Twitter, right? Twitter would do 3 festivals a year. What's now Oath would do 5 festivals a year. Google would do 3 festivals a year. But there was never a place where they were all aggregated in one place. There was never a destination for festivals, right? And they'd move around, they'd be on AOL. And so Rob Ellen, our founder, wanted to build the destination for sort of festivals.
Cool.
It's funny because when I hear these stories, I think back when I was at Coke, I used to do things that I wanted to see happen, right? Because I had the resources to do that, and it just happened that other people liked them. And it's the same thing, I think, with Tom, Ruthie, in the same conversation. But I think looking at that through the lens of the audience and what is relevant to them, let's talk a little bit about some high-level trends or things that forecasting that you're seeing in your respective spaces that are, something we should be aware of or on the lookout for. Maybe starting with Tatiana.
Yeah, sure. So data is still the back. So since everyone else has pretty clear roles, and mine's what does that mean? I'm a senior executive in marketing and business development, and I sit between both. So my team, the role of partnerships in social media began with Twitter, and the idea was the top 5 accounts on Twitter were all music. It was Rihanna, Britney, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Justin Bieber. And then Barack knocked Britney out. And and so from a very basic standpoint, it was we can ramp DAU growth really quickly if we have people that will recruit more artists to join and build partnerships with them. And then every other social media company followed suit and modeled the Twitter media team. So the team I have now does that across all entertainment. And we have data that we look at to determine which verticals we're going to chase. And on every social platform, the top genres are pop and hip hop. What has been really fascinating the past year is the rise of K-pop. I think what should have happened long ago, but is now happening now in a big way, is the rise of Latino music in the mainstream, not being a secondary market, but being primary market. One really interesting data point that we're seeing that no one else is talking about yet is we're seeing the rise of C-pop, which is Chinese pop, on Tumblr. So. Cool hunters. Put that out there. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on right now that I think is pretty interesting. And then on a more micro niche level, the resurgence of the 90s in fashion also meant the resurgence of shoegaze and post-punk music. And we've seen a lot of those bands coming back. I mean, Massive Attack, trip hop out of Bristol, headlining Radio City Hall tonight and tomorrow night, sold out. The show's amazing. I saw it twice in LA. But I think, a lot of what was big in the 90s is not only being replicated in style on the platform, but also in music. So I think that's pretty fascinating from a trend standpoint that we're seeing.
Very cool. And from a live event standpoint, Ruthie, what do you see? Are events going to continue to get bigger? Are they going to get smaller? Where's that sort of going from an audience perspective?
I think it's kind of going all the ways. I mean, I think that there's a great place for events at all sizes, but it's what are you doing at those events, and how are you engaging the audiences in a way that's not just I come in, I throw up an Instagram photo, and then I kind of leave. We're very into how do you create movements and not moments, and so much of what's being designed right now is for these fleeting Insta moments where like our work really doesn't abide by that and we really move away from that. But non-specifically like event-related, a big trend that we're really seeing is specifically in the music space is just this trend towards inclusion, which is amazing. And there are so many like young women trying to start like female artist-driven festivals, and there's a lot of focus now on like artists with disabilities and, you know, sexual orientations, people of color, and all of that. And like we are very careful in all of our programming to make sure that's represented, but we're really seeing it now from the way that things are getting booked to the kind of content that's really starting to pop, and like that's really interesting and amazing. And then the other trend that we are seeing and also pushing all of our partners towards is like, how are you backing artists that stand for some sort of progress? Like the Beyoncés of the world don't need your brand money. You know, how can you, brands are the only philanthropists left for musicians and artists, so how can you take that responsibility seriously and say, I need to align with artists that actually have a voice and have a purpose and help drive progress instead of halt it?
That's cool. I mean, that's definitely the deeper level of partnership, right?
Yeah.
That I think works both ways.
Yeah.
If I can throw another trend in there that I actually think is going to make it easier to put brands and bands together, is I think smart musicians are moving away from the cycle, right? So it used to be like, you know, record, tour, follow up, rest, and then the brand beat had to align with the musician's beat in the cycle. And I remember being on the brand side, and there were all these times where the cycles didn't align, right? You'd go approach an artist, and theirs would be off cycle and just wouldn't want to work with you because they're off cycle. And I think the smartest artists in the world now, coming from hip hop and pop, are never off.
Yeah.
Right.
And the good news about the artist never being off is that means the opportunity for intersections with brands is sort of never off, right?
There's no cycle. They're
Right.
just,
So
they're
if there's no cycle,
constantly releasing
it's like my
content.
product launch doesn't have to align with your album launch anymore because you're dropping
Yeah,
breadcrumbs, you know, 24/7, 365.
it's true. Yeah. And Tom, you see instrumental music?
Right. Good. Yeah, I mean, you know, not like rocket science in terms of the core idea, but you know, we're thinking about it in some different ways. But just like emerging talent owns the conversation now more than it ever has, whether it's with fans, with the youth, and with the brands that we talk to. And so, you know, for example, when we're actually just tonight launching a very cool program in LA with Acura called Precision Crafted Performances. We worked with Acura to come up with the slate of performers on this program. And this was a program where Acura had the idea that it makes more sense to work with emerging talent that's right on the inflection point. And it makes sense from a budgetary standpoint, so it's better results and makes budgetary sense. But there's the question of who to work with. And so emerging talent's very important, but also at the same time, people want data. People don't want just to hear, here's some cool artists, you know. So with Acura, there's a big program, so we took them, we walked them through, we said, okay, here are the directional talent we're proposing, but also here is the thinking behind why these people are relevant, data standpoint, in terms of our platform, other platforms. And also here's just some general ideas surrounding how you should think about emerging talent, which maybe you can even use if you do another campaign without Genius. You know, just so we're going to help you understand this. And then, you know, that kind of leads to the performers tonight. You know, Destiny Rogers, Olivia O'Brien, not like the most kind of intensely emerging artists, but the right artists for Acura through that conversation. Another sort of element to this is the importance of TikTok. TikTok for Genius has emerged as basically our most important social platform in terms of growth. And so this was a platform that we got on about 4 months ago. You know, we just, you know, limited resources, et cetera. And so then we decided to really invest. And it outpaced our Twitter and our Instagram after 4 months, which has been a pretty wild experience. And it's not the case for all brands, but for a brand like Genius that's trying to both locate emerging talent and make content with emerging talent, TikTok is number one. And so if you're a brand, you should think about TikTok because it has that cycle where it's like you can learn about a new artist on TikTok and then content with that artist does the best on TikTok. And so it's really this virtuous cycle of taking emerging artists and breaking them. And it's kind of unfortunate, you know, for TikTok, if you look at like Lil Nas X becomes huge on TikTok, signs with Columbia, and now TikTok has to pay to play Lil Nas X's music. So it's kind of a weird thing. But anyway, TikTok's here to stay.
Cool. Should we open up some questions?
Yeah, I think if you guys have any questions, I think we have some time. Just anyone?
Questions? Sure. Oh wait, we have a
yeah.
thing. Oh wow.
Oh, wow.
All right. So let's just go through. How do you actually measure sponsorships? Who wants to take that one? God.
We both probably have an opinion on this.
You go first.
Okay. So when I was at Nielsen, we were looking at how you could do this pre and post. On a post level, for a CPG standpoint, consumer packaged goods, for those of you who don't know, there are really granular ways you can do that. We could actually look at how many units of 7-Up, Coke, Pepsi were being sold, not only just at events, whether it's geogating something, but actually like products in relation to a sponsorship. The reality was a lot of people weren't doing that. A lot of times it was more about brand affinity. I could even code there's like a very popular brand that only sponsors hip hop, and a lot of the data we had was like, your consumers are not listening to hip hop, and they did not care, because it would be a lot of like, oh, my CMO likes Jay-Z, or oh, you know, my dad loves Katy Perry. So what I saw is, if you want to do it, there are very big data companies like Nielsen that you can pay a lot of money to. There's also some relationship management companies that I've seen. I think AnyRoad or OpenRoad is one of them I was seeing recently that had a beta I was going to look into, that looks at it for an experience, because I do a lot of experiential as well, that does it just on the experiential basis, like who's coming in, what was their experience of your event beyond just the basic email marketing stuff. But it's pretty nuanced.
And I think that's really interesting, because when you talk about measuring the silos of experiential or a platform, that happens pretty easily. I mean, there's systems in place. When you talk about measuring music as a whole, we're talking about a whole different thing, the impact of music against your marketing, because music is not a silo. I mean, it's really a horizontal. It plays the role of design when you think about it. It's from content to experiences to, your sonic identity, to your social media, to your content. Like, it plays a role throughout. And that's when it gets really hard to measure the impact of music, right? It's something I'm absolutely obsessed with, and I spend far too much time thinking about.
One thing I would say that I think we should say, and it's like, this is very 360, but the other thing I would say is, have a music person in the room when these decisions are made. That is number one. Like, number one, it's sort of like when you see a panel talking about feminism and it's all dudes, It's
Those are the best.
You can do it. Not the best idea. So if you have someone that's talking about music, get someone who actually speaks the language, because it's a language, it's a culture, and you can't manufacture culture. You either have it or you don't, right? So I think that's why you'd bring in a roofie, because they speak the culture, and so they can create that for you.
So we had an interesting thing. So when our program, the music program, is called For Those Who Tour Now, it's been running for 5 years in 6 different cities. It was originally called the Patch House. A lot of you probably heard of it in that context. Let me back up for a second. The language that we all use, right, are social impressions and media dollar impressions and all that kind of stuff, which means everything and nothing. Like, we all are sort of bought into the fact that these are like fake things. I think that the bigger the number, the better your recap deck. So we work really hard to try to assign meaning to those things. So when we were working with Sour Patch Kids, after 3 years, they gave us all the stats on a $3 million spend. They earned $300 million in media value, but we actually were able to work with their teams to tie it very directly to candy sales. And during those 3 years, it was the fastest growing candy brand in the world between our program and a YouTube program that they had done. And now we have a lot of smaller brands who come in. We have our big brand sponsors, but then we have a lot of smaller brands who are essentially paying product placement to get their product on the shelves in all of our houses. And from the get-go of this program, we did something that I still think is honestly really smart, is that the brand of the patch, or For Those Who Tour, doesn't get in the way. The entire digital strategy of this program is that the artists create their own content with no oversight, and they speak directly in their own voices to their fans, showing gratitude for these products. And so they are really excited to do that, because we've built this program. They're getting this amazing experience for free that saves them a ton of money, and they're so happy to talk about Shure microphones or to talk about Soylent or whatever it is. And so then we're able to go back to our partners and say, the actual dollar value of getting an artist like a Billie Eilish 3 years ago, or Tank and the Bangas, talking about your drink, and we are able to assign dollar amounts that way.
It's amazing. And it's the reason why podcasting advertising works, because you're getting this signal directly from the host that you like and trust, right? It's the same thing with musicians. It's the way we work with influencers as brands, right? We give our brand over to influencers to create the content that's relevant for their audience and put it out there. Yet with musicians, we're like, hey, sing about Doritos with the Backstreet Boys, we give them these cockamamie scripts. So that's really interesting. Yeah, it's cockamamie. Yeah.
You want to go to the next?
That's the first time it's been heard in a panel in 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. The next question, beyond sponsorships and activations, how can agencies and brands better incorporate themselves into their creative? I think we kind of talked about it a little bit, is having a music person in the room. It was one of the biggest things that I've dealt with over years, is music was always the last conversation. And a lot of times music was actually the main driver of, an execution or a campaign in that sense.
Yeah, and I agree, and I also think it was sort of like chasing the dragon, right? It's always like the conversations around like who's biggest now, right? Which with brands, which I think is, to your point, whether like an executive likes it or an executive's kid said something, or even just they're looking at top line data, right? It's like, that might not be a velocity curve, right? And by the time it might not be a fit for your brand, or by the time you're done, the velocity curve has changed. And so the conversation should sort of be like, what's a better fit for your brand, right? Than like, who's got the hottest metrics.
Exactly. Who's organic and authentic to your brand, as opposed to who has the most eyeballs at the moment. I used to love in the music business where, a pop artist we're female pop artists right now are blowing up and all this stuff, and all A&R guys, we'd all get together, and the head of the company would say, we need more female pop artists. So they would all run out and get it. By the time they got those next female pop artists, it wasn't female pop artists anymore. You know what I mean?
I also think that, we all love music and we're all going to do music work forever, but I don't think every brand needs a music strategy, and I don't think every brand should have a music strategy. And when I have a brand like a giant sports conglomerate who's like, I need a music strategy, I'm like, but do you?
Yeah.
Like, can we talk about it? Because I don't know. Like, don't just jump on the bandwagon just because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, I've had people try to license a song, and I saw the same, scene put to picture with really kind of subtle score, and I said, that you need to not license that song. It's perfect how it is in that sense. But people think that if they're going to license an artist or whatever, that's going to enhance that piece of content in that sense. But
Cool. Should we wrap or?
we got time for one more.
One more. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I like the last
So here's the thing, on the
Which
instrumentals,
phrasing are we-
I like instrumental music. It's not like our thing, okay, but I will say this. Instrumental music from a consumer standpoint is not big, but from a producer standpoint, in terms of creating instrumental music for someone else to perform lyrical music over is huge. And in a world where music is more democratic than it's ever been, the production behind songs is the most democratic part of that. If you are a performer, there still needs to be a reason to listen to you besides the music that you are producing. You can't make it without that. But if you're a producer, if you're behind the scenes producing the track, you can be anyone. You can be a kid in your bedroom, and you can make an amazing song that's #1. Genius will do a video about you, and we'll shoot you in your bedroom. We do this many times. So more democratic than it's ever been in a world that's the most democratic. So I love instrumental songs. I just don't like to listen to them unless there's lyrics.
That's hilarious.
All right, so
Can I get the
time. Let's go through the last one. Like, which brands are
people
doing it
on the
really
spot.
well and why? I'll throw my favorite in the mix, which is Vans. And the reason Vans is because they've done it with consistency, and they look at music not as a tactic, but as an investment, and it's paying off for them. I mean, they're doing so well in culture right now, and I'm not saying it's all because of music, but it's because of the way they continually sort of invest and create that consistency and trust in what they're doing from a marketing perspective.
I think we had it on our podcast, Lyft.
Yeah.
Right? I think Lyft has an approach to music that's different, and it's obvious, right? And you wouldn't think it's so obvious you're in a car going somewhere. So I've been very excited about how they have integrated music in.
I'm going to go to the other end of the spectrum, which is, you sort of asked, like, why does somebody have a music strategy? And I like American Express, which is like one of the things they give you is access, right? And so it makes sense, right? If you're a platinum card holder or a black card holder, right? There's a space in the, you get access to tickets first, right? So that's access. There's physical access on locations. And they do it sort of at all levels. Like if you were at Cannes this year, they took Carbone from New York to Cannes. Like they're a brand that's about bringing special access to special things to their card holders, and music has a great role in that, I think.
Anyone else have another one?
This is super basic, but I love the creative for John Barbados with bands. They've always done really cool. Right now they're working with Bad Flower that a lot of people might not know about. They did a bunch with Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode. It's kind of like the opposite end of Vans, but it's the same thing where the brand just kind of feels like the background while the artist is kind of in the foreground.
Yeah.
And it's always stuck out to me as a brand that seems to do it pretty well.
Mine would be, and this is also basic, it's like NPR, Tiny Desk.
Oh,
I think that's just so genius. It's so lo-fi. It works every time. It's such a lift for the artist. I mean, it's just such an easy no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think just even more same level of basicness, you know, and bias, whatever. But like, I think Apple's doing a great thing right now with the launch of Lyrics and Apple Music. I think that feature was a huge thing that they had to do a lot of work on the licensing, data side, everything. And now they're launching some really great creative that I think is again leveraging a very obvious thing, which is Lyrics that should be in a streaming service, but now Apple is finally doing it in an end-to-end way. You know, got a lot of props for them.
Cool.
Excited to work with them.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Big hand for our great panel.